So for those of you who are already on, welcome. We're just waiting. We're just going to hold off. We've got quite a lot of people who are going to be joining us today. So we're just going to wait for everyone to dive in and click in, and then we will be starting just after 12 o'clock to allow everyone time to join us, and then we're going to get started. Welcome to you that have joined. We're just waiting just for another couple of moments just to allow everyone to join. We had a lovely flurry of interest. We've got around 100 people or more joining us from all over. So we're just going to allow everyone to just be with us and get settled. And then we are going to be launching our very first webinar for our IPAF Women Empowered Access series. So really exciting day today. Just watching those participant numbers go up, which is lovely. We're just going to wait another moment or so. So we are about to start. We're just going to allow you to get settled, welcome you to our webinar. Okay, so we are going to get started. Thank you for the team that are looking after us today and welcome. Well, this is a really exciting moment. This is the first webinar in a series of webinars aimed at women empowered access and designed and created by IPAF. And I'm not in an IPAF office, as you can see. So my name is Ali Moore and I'm supporting the team today. What we're going to do is we're going to talk today about this concept of women in leadership. It's always an interesting topic. We have an amazing panel that are joining us in a little while, and we're going to be diving into some questions. There's also the opportunity for you to put questions in the Q&A. So we've got a team that are looking out for those as well. So don't be shy, pop your questions in there, and we're going to try and get through some of those as we work through. But thank you so much for joining. So we're going to dive straight in. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to just kind of give us a bit of context about the topic of women in leadership. And I'm really hoping that technology goes well with us today. And welcome if you are just joining us. So I'm just going to start. We're going to be looking at this concept. So I'm hoping it's just loading up. Okay, so women in leadership, as I say, always a really fascinating topic. And we've got some amazing women leaders and women business owners joining us in just a few moments. Just to set the scene, I think everyone is familiar with this concept of the leadership ladder and holding the hammer to break through the glass ceiling. And this has always been a phrase that's been used. So for me, I have been, I'm now a business owner in my own right. I have been a senior leader in a large global company and worked my way through that. And I've also worked, as many of you are, in more of an industry that perhaps previously has predominantly been seen as male orientated. So I have a background in logistics and operations and in that leadership role. So when we think about women in leadership, I think it's really interesting to share experiences of what it's been like, what it means to be a woman in leadership, but also maybe some of the social and cultural and media influences that have shaped us. So I was growing up in the 80s. I was the first sort of generation in my family of females that went on to have maybe what we class as a full career. This was something that my mum and my grandparents, my nans didn't do. And there were a lot more options open to me. The 80s was also when we started, I think, to really talk about women moving through the career ladder, women moving into leadership roles. But kind of the images that I got when I was growing up in the 80s, so we have, very famous film, The Devil Wears Prada. This was, somebody who was portrayed as very fierce, very tough, potentially based on Anna Wintour that we see there, head of Vogue for many years, and we have Margaret Thatcher. She was, the sort of the woman leadership of the time. We have films like Working Girl. There was this real 80s perception that in order to be a woman in leadership, you had to be tough, you had to be fierce, you had to almost take on some of those more masculine traits in order to be successful. And I was having a really interesting conversation with Joe from IPAF, who leads up the marketing team, about women that are leaders now that actually look at and are seen for some of those more female qualities. And I know that we've got a great question for the panel that we're going to dive into later, and they're going to give their view on it. But there was this real image of what it meant to be a leader. And when I started to work through my career, there was this view that you had to compete with the men, and it was tough, and you had to really fight your way rather than embracing who you were and what qualities you brought to the table. Just making sure my slide works. So let's look at where we are at the moment. So let's bring it forward now and say, well, actually, how are we doing? So I was looking at some statistics to see what women in leadership looks like. And, you know, so out of the Fortune 500 companies, and these are based on data from 2022, 74 of the CEOs were female from those Fortune 500 companies that we had. 41 were featured in 2021, so we've had an increase, and just 7 back in 2002. So we are making inroads. We are seeing women come through the corporate ladder. We are seeing success. But I still feel we have a way to go, and it feels like that progress isn't as fast as it could have been. And if we look in Europe, then we see, that 46.3% of Europe's working individuals are female. But of that 46.3%, just 35.3 of those were actually in managerial roles. So we've definitely got women in the workforce. Of course we have, but how many of them are actually stepping into those leadership roles that will then take them through into higher roles as well? And 7.8% of all CEOs in Europe were female, so still very small, still very small. And I thought this was a fascinating fact, so of all the countries in the world, only 17 countries have female heads of state and 19 countries have a female head of government. So do I feel like we are making inroads? Yes, I absolutely do. When I think back to, growing up, as a child in the 80s, thinking about the options were open. But then when you actually see where we are, there's still a way to go. And we're actually going to have another webinar in the series, which is going to look at some of the maybe logistical challenges which face women, which have perhaps prevented them from even putting themselves forward into those leadership roles. But really interesting to actually see where we are now in terms of our women in senior leadership roles. So just a little bit of background, as I say, I started off in a very traditional role, so actually not a leader, and in what was a very, I guess, classed as a female orientated role. I was a BT operator girl. Okay, so I sat with the headphones on and I sat on the switchboard, and that was, deemed as a really good role. You went in there and that was a job for life. I then moved into another through no kind of like career plan. I didn't have any mentoring. I didn't really look for leadership. But due to circumstance, I moved into, again, what can be seen as a more female orientated role, which is I went into HR, stayed within BT, but moved into HR. And at that time, there was lots of females at one level in HR, but actually when you got to the senior levels, it was still very male dominated, actually. The directors and those that were on the board tended to be men. And that's where my leadership journey started. I was then really, really fortunate to join a global company when they first started. So I had one of my roles at Amazon, and that's where I studied leadership skills. And it's interesting because I went from this lovely corporate world into an HR world, but it was based within logistics, and it was based within the operations center and the warehouse center. And when I joined, which was back in 2003, again, we had no female leaders in logistics or operations. They were all male, and the women were in roles like HR and the support roles and the payroll functions, etc. But it was coming into the stages where women could push for leadership. And I have to say that my journey through leadership was relatively smooth. So I'm definitely not someone who says I had blocks at every stage. I think I knew what I wanted and I knew where I wanted to go, and I actually felt quite comfortable. but I had some great people that inspired me, and I think that's really important when you're a woman who's looking to move into leadership. Is who are your role models and who are you looking for? And I had some women leaders, some women bosses that actually allowed me to see that I could lead in my own way, that I didn't have to be this tough, almost like masculine version. I didn't have to compete with the men. I could actually bring my own traits into it. And I think that's really what allowed me to have success and climb into that senior leadership role. So I know the panel are going to share some of their experiences as well. But I want you to kind of think about, as women in leadership, whether you are already in a leadership role or whether you're aspiring to be, is who is around you and who can inspire you, and what is it about them that makes you feel as though you want to emulate that, and why do they do well in that particular role. So that kind of brings us nicely to, where do we go now with women in leadership? Again, really interesting conversation with Jo on this, and I'm really interested in people's comments and thoughts on this. So we have separate women in leadership programs, and I think that's been absolutely needed, because we need to gain that momentum. We need to have a voice. We need to allow our leaders of the future to have a safe space, which is why the Women Empowered Access group that IPAF have put together, I think, is just a fabulous group that you can join on LinkedIn and become part of. So if you're not part of that, here's a little plug. You should definitely join in the conversation. Women from many, many different industries there. But as we move into a world where we're seeking equality, what does women in leadership as a program look like? Do we continue to have it as a separate thing that we discuss, or and how do we do that with a generation actually which is moving away from defined roles such as male and female, and are more gender fluid? There's a whole piece around what the future of women in leadership program looks like, and also what are the skills that we want to hone for our women as they move into leadership programs. What are our current challenges as we're starting to see some momentum, as we're starting to see more women go into leadership roles? What are the things that our younger generations and our aspiring leaders are looking to have, and what support do they need? So I don't have the answer to that. I wish I did. That would be a gold mine, right? That would be a program in itself. But I think it really sets the scene for opening up this discussion of women in leadership programs. I'm now running my own business, and that is a whole different ball game again. And actually, many women are leading the way in terms of entrepreneurship. And again, when we look at the logistics, there are some reasons why running your own business perhaps gives you the flexibility. But women are very successfully now setting up their own businesses and driving, or or as I call sailing their own ships. And I think this is a really nice time now to kind of hand over to our panel and to get their thoughts on some of the questions. We've had some questions already sent in, so we're going to dive in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Currently that's all worked really well. I probably jinxed it now, but I'm going to see my lovely panel. I want to introduce the panel that we have here today. So if you can see, you're going to see the people come up on the screen. So just bear with me one moment as I get organized. So we have Uana, and Uana is a key account sales manager, and she's based over in Italy. And she's been a big part of the Women Empowered Access group, I know, and has done many talks. So I'm excited to have Uana on the panel. Welcome, welcome. And we have Vicky. Now, Vicky is the founder and managing director of International Platforms. So it's great to have female entrepreneur on here. She founded her own company. And, was I've got here, was the winner of the 2023 IAPA EDI Awards, which is at the IPAF event in April. So congratulations. We love to see people actually striving ahead in the business. And we have Debbie Hamitman. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And Debbie is Director of People, Process and Digital Technology at JLG, and she's based in the Netherlands. So all working in these kind of, powered industry, again, what we've previously thought of as industries that are male orientated, and all being leaders in their field. So let's dive in, find out. So, Luan, I want to come to you first. I know you've got some thoughts on this, and we've been talking about this actually before we actually came on. And then I'm going to go to Vicky, and I know Vicky's got some really cool thoughts on this as well, which is, what strengths and qualities do you think women bring to the table? What is it? Let's dive in and see if there's some differences.
Thank you, Ali, and welcome to everybody who joined us. I'm very, very happy to be on this first webinar, hoping that we're going to get this ball rolling and all of the other ones are going to be well attended like this one. Regarding the question, I think there's a lot of things that you can say about what women can bring to any industry. But if we're talking about our own, just imagine that the way in which we perceive the world is simply biologically different from men. And that is a fact. Scientifically, it's been proven that almost all women have 180-degree peripheral vision. That literally means we get to see more. Hence, we are very useful in any sort of job where you have to prospect, where you have to observe, where you have to take notes. Because of our excellent ability to communicate, which again, it is a biological fact given by the way in which we evolved as animals. We are able to actually take better account of what's going on around us and tell it to others. We are excellent storytellers just simply because of the fact that we do indeed speak more than men do. I would say that that's the butt of the joke, us girls getting together, talking. It actually helps a lot because it strengthens bonds, but it also passes along information in a very, very specific way. We are able to better describe events, both past and future. We're better able to explain how a decision was actually taken because we're better able at using attributes and adjectives and a wider range of words. And that is, again, it has nothing to do with opinion. It's more of a biological fact. And I think that even those small little things are amazing in so many industries, and our own including, considering that most of what we do involves so many steps and so many different levels and so many people. So being able to actually see more, mind you, we also see more color. So again, our eyes are simply more adept at actually perceiving subtle changes in colors, which could be very important, especially even in engineering, as well as, for example, again, prospecting. So all these small little things definitely make us for good people to have around at work.
Perfect. Thank you. Vicky, I'm coming over to you because we spoke about this before, and I know you felt there were some real things that, women bring to the table of value.
Yeah, I mean, when I was researching these questions, I found it really interesting to start to write down what I felt were the actual differences between men and women. And I was fortunate enough some years ago when I was working for Genie to go to a women's conference in America, and I listened to some speakers there, and I remember that one of the speakers said, it's actually a fact that women's brains are wired up differently to men's brains, and that enables us to think about things differently to men, and it enables us to take different approaches and use different types of logic and thought processes. And that I found really fascinating at the time. And in the years that's gone by since then, I really think that is a skill that women do add to the party. And I think in addition to that, we have a different level of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize emotions in yourself and others, and to be able to relate it to people and situations. And I think that enables us to change or take a different approach, possibly to men, and that enables us to look at situations differently and approach them differently. Yeah. I think one of the more common expectations between men and women is that women have great multitasking skills, and I think that's proven in a whole wide variety of life skills, bringing up families, juggling different tasks and situations and problems, and I think that we bring that through into our business lives as well, and we are able to simultaneously deal with lots of different situations of different severity levels or situations that require different types of thinking. And I think that's one of the skills that we really do bring to the table. And another one, I think, not to go on too long in this point for you, but I think that we are also very adaptable. So if we see that the path that we're going down is not necessarily the right path, then we have the ability to be able to change and adapt that. And we can do that subconsciously, and we're always assessing where we are, whether it's the right place to be, whether we're heading in the right direction that we want to be going in, and make the necessary changes as we go through our daily lives.
I think there's some great points there. And, you know, in my day job as a psychotherapist, you know, that the whole science around it, as we say, this is not us saying women are this and men are that. There is scientific proof about the differences and the different traits and evolution and how we have become, you know, the species that we've become. And, you know, certainly when I work with, you know, teams, you know, mixed teams, but also, you know, working with couples in the therapy space, you know, men and women as couples, there is a real difference in how we approach and how the language that's used and the emotion. So I think there's some great points there that you brought there. Debbie, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think the input was really, really good on the topic. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I'm coming to Debbie next because Debbie was really keen to talk about our next question. And this is a biggie, right? This is the one that always gets people talking about, you know, women in leadership. And the question was, is there a bias in our view of women leaders, and have you experienced it? Over to you, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I was immediately triggered by the question because I'm working already for 37 years and I've always aspired to have a career. And I live and work in the Netherlands, and there is still a huge bias in our culture that as a woman, you should not aspire to be a director or to have a serious career. And in the very subtle things, you feel that constantly. And my advice to everyone on the call is never let that set you back and move around it. A big example is when I was 31, I had my first child and I was working at a tax firm. I was a tax lawyer in that time. And I sensed from the moment I got pregnant, I will never be a partner at this firm. And I decided, okay, is that the problem of the current partners or is it my problem? And I decided to resign to go after my HR career that I now am in. And at my resignation, they literally said, how can you be a partner if you are a mother? And this is the year 2000. It's not that long ago. And I decided to move around their problem. But it was for me a very big signal like, oh yeah, this bias is really out there and we have to find our way to get to your aspiration points. Another example is at my previous company. I was the first female director to represent the company with the Works Council. And there we had the Works Council, 15 members. And the first question the chairman asks, so Debbie, are you selected because of your competencies or because of your gender? I hope the first. And my immediate answer was, so dear chairman, is that a question you also asked to any of my predecessors in this role? Mm-hmm. And everyone was looking like, oh, what is she asking now? But just the fact that they want to ask these things or tell you or ask you different things because you're female, my advice to everyone is to, when you notice it, immediately ask a question like, would you have asked this if I were male? Or did you ask my predecessors the same thing? Because it is so subtle, but it keeps happening. And I see it getting less with the current generations. I see the change, not only diversity for women, but also minority or the other communities that we have. So it's getting better, but I was really intrigued to answer this. And the last thing I would like to add is to your point, Ellie, women are always seen as either too tough or too soft.
Mhm.
I always share with people, I'm very soft on the relationship, but I'm tough on the content. So we do make that connection that Oana referred to as well, but we can be very tough on the content. And mixing that well, I think, makes us great leaders. So thanks for asking.
I love that. I love that. I think that's a really great concept because, you know, we've spoken about this prior to the call, but we are interested. We are interested in people and people's lives. And, you know, when we see some of the, you know, leaders that, you know, and the characters that were portrayed when women started to go into leadership, it almost stripped back those female qualities. And when that happens, you know, women are then perceived as aggressive. You know, they're not seen as assertive. They're seen as, you know, too, like you say, too tough. But a lot of the time it doesn't fit, you know, with the person either. It doesn't fit with, so that blend, you know, of being able to be empathetic and connect and be interested, but also be able to do what needs to be done is a fabulous skill. Vicky, I'm going to come back to you and then over to Anna. Things you want to add on that?
Yeah, there was a couple of points that that I was thinking about last night when I was preparing for this, and I think two key points are sometimes I think the bias is almost self-driven by women who believe that they cannot achieve or don't have the confidence to believe that they can achieve. They think to themselves, or they potentially might think that you know, they want to have a family and therefore they can't progress in their career. And there is an assumption that they won't be considered for roles because they're women, and they allow themselves to be perceived in that way. And yes, it can take some strength, some internal strength and some confidence to be able to push past that, but it can definitely be done without a shadow of a doubt. And I think it's important that women don't self-limit themselves, and potentially, you know, women may need more encouragement to be made to feel stronger, to be able to go forward in their careers and to test those boundaries and to be able to push forward into higher positions. And I think sometimes men can also feel threatened by women's abilities and their ability to work really hard and to be able to be productive at times. And so I think sometimes the bias is also driven by men potentially looking at it from a self-preservation role. They don't want to be at risk from these hardworking, persistent women who are, you know, determined to be able to achieve things. They would rather that was not an issue for them to contend with. And I think also that the bias is quite often also conscious and unconscious as well. And I think due to historic situations that you've referred to some yourself and also Debbie there, and I think we've all of us on the panel here have probably experienced different experiences throughout our careers where subconsciously we've felt that we've hit barriers and people have potentially not considered us for these positions. And I think it's really important that it's not just an assumption anymore that because there's more men in leadership roles, that is the most likely scenario for the replacement of that leadership role. And I think it's important that kind of perception is eradicated as much as possible.
Perfect, thank you. And I just want to add on there as well, I also think sometimes women can see other women as a threat as well. We've almost been put into a world sometimes where we have felt the need to compete against each other, whereas actually we know that when we collaborate, you know, we really make, you know, powerful things happen. So I think there's a lot going on there.
If I could just add one more thing there.
Luana, anything you want to add to that? Oh yeah. Go on, Vicky, finish off.
Sorry, just one more thing. With the amount of research that's been done on this topic, I think for the people that's looked at this research and then applied it to their own businesses, they'll be able to see that the different benefits of bringing women into leadership roles or women making it through to these leadership roles has massive benefits to their businesses in terms of profitability, employee retention, growth, corporate and social responsibility, and also reputation of the business as a whole. And I think those are real tangible benefits to businesses in having a mixed leadership team.
Yeah, I agree. Luana?
Just like Vicky said yesterday, I had a thought about bias, and now Vicky has just made me think about something else that I hadn't. So I'll say two things about bias. The first would be, just everybody on this call, I'd like you to imagine just the most stereotypical burly man that you can, job site guy with a hard hat and everything, okay? And now imagine him being in a shop where you're going to go and buy your next bag, or maybe baby supplies. It would be the bias is not necessarily just, I think it's very widespread, unconscious bias. We've assigned genders to industries, to shops, to lines of business. We literally wouldn't ever imagine this burly construction guy type stereotypical guy being in a baby shop. You would go in and look at him and go like, what's going on? Where's the soft-spoken female that will guide me through, new supplies for my babies? So I think it's bias is very widespread. And I think I think a lot of countries are now tackling that idea of bias for the first time, even in aspects like that, because it's not just our industry, it's literally everywhere, and it's literally in us. So it's kind of addressing that, or trying to kind of find a way to mediate it every day. When you do get into a baby shop or in a shop where you would expect something else than what you see, I invite everybody on this talk to just take a deep breath and go like, you know what, let's give it a try. Who knows what might happen, and that's kind of like how you work through bias. The second thing that I wanted to say was, and I'm connecting back to Debbie, one of the biggest problems for women in becoming leaders is the fact that we are also expected to be proficient in other areas of our life, or we're expected not to be proficient in other areas of our life. Oh, you're a manager, you're a director, you're a CEO. Great. You probably don't have any kids, and you're never at home, and somebody else cleans your house, and you probably never have cats. It's that constant pressure of cleaning the house and making dinner, kind of at least being able to make some sort of dinner, and maybe having a spouse, maybe potentially having kids. And if you don't do any of those, you sacrificed all of that for your career. So it's always a constant having to think, did I want those things? Did I really want them and I didn't know I want them? And I gave all of that up for my career? Did I not notice that happening? And I think that's another, I've never ever heard any of my male colleagues think, I want kids at some point along the way. Do you think I should continue on this path on my career? Like they don't, I mean, it's something that just does not, nobody questions. If you want to have kids as a guy, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine as well. If you can't cook, that's fine. If you don't clean your own house, that's fine. If you don't have any pets, that's okay. I think that's sense of perfection that is attributed to women, especially successful women. Like there's no sort of space for error, for being common, ordinary, human, late, worried, sick, etc. I think that's the biggest bias that we live with as women across the industries, not just in ours.
Yeah, and Oana, I always say choose your partner wisely, because I would not have had my career without the two men I've been married to. So choose wisely.
Yes, definitely. And I think, again, going back culturally, as we started to see women come into the leadership role again, I was looking at some of the books. I'm a book addict, and I have many books, and, going back many years, and, very famous book, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. That was the Bible of women in leadership. And the title says it all. You can't be nice and get the corner office, be the leader. And the very famous, driven from the Cosmo article, Having It All, which actually portrayed, to your point, Oana, that it wasn't just about having the career. Having it all meant that you kept it all together. You looked amazing, you hit the gym, you had your coffee in the takeaway cup, you know, you had the amazing house, you had the dinner parties, you held down the career, you know, you were having it all was just huge. And then, you know, when you speak to articles about the author now, she was like, that was never my intention. That was just what they thought was the catchiest title. And if you actually read it, she's got some great points in there. But this was how we were driven, you know, and now we carry that forward, you know, that sense of needing to do it all.
It's also exhausting. It's
Right.
exhausting. It's exhausting. Nobody pays. I read an article just the other day that women's and I know this is going to not sound positive, but women's work around the house, like your own house, not somebody else's house, literally just cleaning and just making sure everything's okay at the house, is worth I think it was $13.8 trillion of unpaid work. Literally, like we could all quit our jobs and we'd have jobs, basically. So that's the extent to which we don't even recognize the fact that the laundry doesn't get done by itself, the fact that if there's milk in the fridge or if their windows are clean, and we do it, I do it, everybody does it. All women instinctually know it's my duty to do that, which is not an issue, but then obviously it becomes very complicated to put together with maybe the schedules that would require maybe somebody in a leadership position who sometimes will have to be more involved, or maybe you're mentally drained when you come back from the office because of the work that you had to put in. So it becomes even more daunting that you have to then be, like you said, expected to throw the dinner party, and I agree, Debbie, obviously finding a partner is ideal, but again, it comes back to, do men ever think I need to find a really nice partner or else I'm not going to succeed in my career? No. That doesn't happen.
Then you outsource. Yeah, I've also outsourced a lot. It's choices. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting, isn't it? I'm going to dive into the next question in a moment, but it's interesting that we're still having this whole debate around what it looks like and how we schedule our lives as women and what that means when we're in a leadership role. Everything is brought into the mix still. So it's always such a fascinating topic. So Vicky, I want to lead with you on this one. And I want to ask you, you know, being there in that role that you're in, do you feel that you can be yourself? Do you feel that you can be authentic? Have you ever felt that you couldn't be?
No, well, I 100%, by running my own business, I've been able to iron out all of those bad leadership experiences that I've worked through over the years. So I've learned along the way how not to do things, or how, if I had the choice, I wouldn't do it like that. And so when I started my business 3.5 years ago, I was really aware of how I wanted to build the mentality of the business, of the staff, of the team. And I'm a real believer in continuously learning and exploring different ways in which to lead the team. And I want to make sure that everybody's skills are recognized and are being utilized. And one of the ways that I've done this is I'm part of a group called Vistage, which is an executive coaching team, effectively, and that supports business owners and gives you a format where you can bounce ideas off other business owners that are experiencing the same sort of experiences that you are, and have they found ways of getting through that particular scenario or problem or issue. And that's really helped to build me as a leader in this particular position that I have now. But in addition to that, I think it's important to recognize that when you've been an employee and you're now an employer, I've got the empathy of being able to see things from both sides of the coin. So I have an unbiased opinion of what it's like to be on both sides of that situation. So I think I can then get a good visibility of how that employee wants to feel and how that employee should be able to feel. And if they're not happy for any reason, to be able to spot that in the earliest stages and be able to deal with that appropriately. And personally, I think it's enabled me to be free to be able to give opportunities and encourage my staff to lead and make decisions, come forward with ideas, to participate in the journey of the business as a whole. And I genuinely believe that teamwork and diversity will create happy and involved staff, and that in itself will make a huge difference to how the business runs and performs.
So I think that, you know, we see that when women set up their own businesses, you can bring that culture in, can't you? You can shape
Definitely.
that. So I want to now throw that out to, let's come to Debbie first. You know, how are you feeling about authenticity in the working world?
Well, I think the authentic leadership is one of the most critical things to be, you know, the best leader possible for your team. And being authentic means people make different choices. So I think everyone should be able to pursue their own career the way they want it, the way they want to organize it, with more or less help at home, with or without a partner, with or without the kids, if you can have them or not. And the authenticity is critical to to bring the best version of yourself to work. And I consider myself lucky that in most of my jobs over the years, I could be my authentic self. And when that started to be pushed back by others or pushed down, then you feel it's time to move and to see if there's another place where you can be a better version of yourself. So it's a really critical element in how you lead. So I love what Vicky said, and being on both sides. It's what you shine out as a leader is what you will get back from your team, end of the day. So.
Oh, and where are you on that?
I do agree with what Debbie said. I think if you have to be authentic, because I think it makes you a better employee, and it ultimately potentially makes you a better leader, or it makes you a better entrepreneur and ultimately makes you a successful entrepreneur. That being said, regarding authenticity, I think I always aim to be above 90%, feeling like I could pretty much 90% be who I am any other day of the year. I do believe there's somewhere between 1 and 10% where you have to take into account that we're all adults, and every now and again you might not choose to be your most authentic self to be able to accommodate other people as well. I can be a lot, hence sometimes I'll say, you know what, I will drop this one. I will not continue. I would, if I'd be authentic, I would, but because we're adults and because the workplace needs, I think peace is one of the most undervalued aspects to have at work. And peace can be achieved sometimes also through compromises, and compromises don't have to be painful. You have to know when it's not worth being authentic with yourself if you're potentially hurting your entire team by pursuing something that is only authentic to you and only important to you and only makes you feel better. So I do strive to take that into consideration and accommodate that with my desire to be as authentic as possible.
I think that's fabulous, because it goes back to that conversation I think you had about emotional intelligence, you know, being emotionally aware that others people's needs and behaviors and wants and reactions are different to yours, and being able to put that in place so that you know, we call it in the therapy space, that ability to decenter yourself, you know, that I don't have to be the center of this, that I can see what's going on and then help those other people, you know, feel more comfortable and compromise. And I think for lots of women, this is a great skill. I think this is a skill that going back to what we bring to the table, that ability to decenter and allow others to have their space and have peace at work. 100%. Yeah. Imagine if we could achieve that, you know, productive, effective, you know, getting things done, and then ourselves and our employees and our co-workers were like, but I'm at peace. That would just be amazing to strive for.
Also, I'll just add one thing on that. I'm somebody, for example, for my own character, I'm somebody who is fine with either a peaceful environment or a chaotic one where people are yelling and we're all very dynamic and active. But what I've learned over the years is I'm comfortable in any given environment. But the default for everybody around the world is peace, in the sense that if you have a peaceful environment, everybody will thrive. If you have a chaotic environment, or maybe somewhere where, you know, everything is a little bit crazy, but it works, it's positive, but just crazy, that is not okay for everybody. Not everybody thrives in that environment. So if the default for everybody is peace, then trying to achieve it, I think, gives you the best chances to make people as comfortable and as productive and as happy to participate as possible. And I think that's another big one that I think women tend to be more aware of it, because we're more, again, biologically, we are the ones that are more responsible for creating those connections between family members, between community members. We're just more at it. Hence, we understand how important it is that at Christmas dinner, the uncles that have different football, you know, they're different football fanatics, sit at the same table for 4 hours and don't kill each other. And I think it's the same thing at the workforce. Like, being able to achieve that workable piece is actually really important. And I think women usually are very good at that. I think that's why we get the HR roles as well, because we're able to kind of like help people achieve peace at the workforce, at the workplace. So.
Yeah. And you know, just to say to the audience, you know, we'd never met each other, you know, most of us had never met each other, and before we had this call, we got the work done, and then we were already sharing what pets we had, and you know what's going on for us. And so yeah, this whole connection piece, you know, women in leadership being able to connect the dots and make those human connections is absolutely crucial. So we're coming almost to the end of our time together, but we have one final question that I'm going to throw open. I'm going to stay with you, Ioana, just to lead on this, and then come back around the panel, which is gaps. Where do you believe there are gaps in women taking leadership roles, and maybe specifically in your industry, and perhaps why that is? Do you have some insights into that?
I was thinking about this. I have 3 points very quickly. First of all, our industry is not sexy in the most brutal way, in the sense that I think there's a lot of talent in our industry, on both sides, in the sense male and female. There's less talent in females, but because there's just less of us, like percentually, there's just not enough of us. So we would need a lot more women, maybe not a lot more women, but the ones that would be willing to join us. And I think in order to become more appealing, we need to show them that it's a lovely industry. My personal experience has been incredible, and I have met amazing people, and I have to say everybody's been very, very, very nice. So I think we just need to make sure that we do show not just women, I would say, and I've had this conversation at the IAPAs where Vicky won this year. We also need to make it interesting for younger people. We have an issue in our industry, not just for women. It would be helpful to have more women on board, because it obviously expands our view on it, but also younger people. We're missing a lot of younger women and men joining in our industry. And it's an amazing industry, but we do need young blood, because it helps us look at stuff in a different way. And finally, maybe the gaps would be what I'm going to connect back to what both Debbie and Vicky said. I think we need to find our allies. We need to find the men in leadership that are more prone to take on mentees that are women, or take on VPs that are women, or take on a successor who would be a woman. We need to find those women who want to invest in us. We need to make sure that we let them know that we want that. That's another thing. Women have a hard time saying, I'd like to become a director. Let's learn to say that. And the guys who are on the call, ask women. We tend to never ask for stuff. So if you kind of think you have an amazing woman on your team who could potentially do better in another leadership position, ask her, just flat out ask her. Worst case scenario, she'll say no. I mean, and it helps because it kind of lowers that pressure on us, where we only think it's in our head that we're that good at what we do. That is imposter syndrome that she was discussing. So having somebody in authority come to us and say, listen, I saw you did a good job. Why don't you think, here's another responsibility. Let's try to move you up in terms of leadership. And I think that's going to help. So if you're on this call and if you have authority in your company, if you have a woman in your team that you feel you could promote, then go ahead and ask her. She might say no, but it's worth an ask.
Perfect. Thank you. Vicky, coming to you.
Well, I think everything that Oana has said there, I agree with 100%. It's absolutely spot on. I think one thing I'd just like to add that might help to narrow the gaps and eradicate the gaps is if we can look at some sort of mentorship scheme. I think to be able to give women more confidence, to be able to go forward for those bigger roles or leadership roles. I know when we met at the Apex show earlier this year, there was some discussions about whether IPAF was going to be able to start up a mentorship scheme, and I'm really 100% behind that. Personally, I did have a mentor for maybe a year, 18 months in one of my previous positions, and that definitely did help. And that mentor was actually a guy at the time. But I think everybody would benefit depending on their own personalities, whether it would be a mentor with a lady or a gentleman. I definitely think that people could gain additional confidence and strength in their abilities to be able to push forward and go for these leadership roles. So I think that's something that should definitely be explored more.
Perfect. Thank you. And Debbie, we'll finish that question with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I am in HR, and a lot of times when people talk about diversity and inclusion, people tend to point at HR. But my take is always it starts from both ends. It starts with leadership that wants to make a change, and it starts with women or minorities, and diversity is broader than just gender, minorities that want to make the step up and put in all the effort, because you never get a career without perseverance or hardship. It doesn't come easy. And measuring and knowing where you stand is one of the first important steps. So in our company, we do measure on the diversity, but we also actively drive it. So when you do your annual succession planning, where's the team going? How are people developing? Make sure there's women on the slate. And if you have no diversity in the slate or in the talent bench, you may want to consider attracting people from outside that bring a bit more diversity. Of course, with the same competencies, going back to my previous experience, it is never gender only, but driving that from both angles, I think will constantly change the needle a bit and bring us in a better and more diverse world, what in the end will bring better results. So as we say in our company, we're better together. So maybe I can end with that.
I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much. So our time together is almost over. Just got a couple of questions there. I think this one, Vicky, is for you. What is the name of the executive group that you were part of? I think you mentioned you were part of an executive support group.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
That's called the Vistage Group. It can be found online, or I can send details to Courtney, who can then pass them on to the question asker.
And I think a question here from Kirsty, and I think we've covered some of it, but I would love to promote women within our company. The issue is attracting women into the industry first. And this is a problem that is highlighted time and again, and how can we attract more? So I think, I think hopefully we've covered some of that. It's about making it seem approachable, making it seem available, getting men on board. We have to do this when we talk about, equality. This is a two-pronged approach, right? We have to work on this together and not separately. So yeah, I would like to thank everybody for their time today, and I hope that that has been, you know, really informative. It's been lovely to see we've kept our audience all the way through. Please do look out for when the next webinar comes available. Sign up for that. And if you aren't already in the group, please join the Women Empowered Access group that you can access on LinkedIn. So thank you so much to everyone for being on the call. Thank you.